Christians Courageous, Chapter 2. Elijah's Holy Press. Elijah Lovejoy. Real heroes are not perfect. Elijah Lovejoy was no different. He made mistakes. He believed in freedom without exception and often became impatient with those who did not believe as he did. We remember him because he dared to make a decision based on his Christian beliefs and was willing to die for that cause. "We smashed your press, Lovejoy," the man at the head of the angry mob shouted. Elijah Lovejoy stared at the jeering, shouting mob. He prayed against the rising fear in him. He turned and rushed into his newspaper office. His printing press was smashed. He leaned against his desk sadly. He wondered what to do. Elijah put out a weekly religious newspaper in Alton, Illinois, called The Observer. In the paper he spoke against slavery. This made some people mad, but Elijah never thought they would go this far. Elijah went home and told his wife what happened. "Our people need this paper," he said. "I only fight evil in the paper. I only do God's work." Mrs. Lovejoy was frightened. "What will we do?" she asked. The young man did not take much time to answer. "I will get another press. It is God's will that I publish this paper." When Elijah was a boy, he was a Christian, but he wasn't very religious. He was the son of a minister and the oldest of 9 children in a little town in Maine. Elijah loved to run and play in the woods. He liked that better than hearing sermons in church. Elijah was a very smart boy, and he worked hard. His father said, "I believe Elijah will be a writer. He is good with words." "No, I think he'll be a teacher," his mother said. "He likes to talk a lot." Elijah did become a teacher. He also wrote for a newspaper. But when he was 30 years old, he heard God's call. He saw his path very clearly. God wanted him to become a minister, and so Elijah studied the Bible and became a minister. Now Elijah was 35, and the newspaper was part of doing God's work. So he scraped together enough money to buy a new press. In a few weeks it was delivered in a wagon. "Look!" a man shouted. "There goes the anti-slavery press. Lovejoy is at it again." Another mob gathered. They ran after the wagon. The driver was frightened. He ran and the mob attacked the press. They broke it up and threw the pieces in the river. Then they went to Elijah's house. "Come on out, Lovejoy," they shouted. The young minister stepped out without fear. He saw the hate burning in their eyes. "What do you want?" he asked. "We busted your new press. We want you to forget about that paper. You're a minister. Get out of politics." To enslave the children of God is wrong. That is God's business. "I will be an enemy of slavery as long as I live," Elijah cried. "That may not be for long, Lovejoy," one burly man shouted. They began to curse the minister. Some of them beat him with their fists. Elijah did not strike back. He remembered how Christ had been struck by the soldiers. He knew that Christ took the blows. He wanted to follow the example of Christ. But Elijah would not quit either. He was going to bring God's truth to the people. It was now autumn. Elijah and his friends raised some money for a new press. Late one evening in September, the new press arrived. "Do not deliver it to the newspaper office," Elijah said. "It won't be safe there. I have rented a stone warehouse. I will keep it there." But the mob saw the press arriving. "There's another press," they screamed in rage. They ran after the wagon. But this time Elijah's friends protected the press, and Elijah went to the mayor of the town. "You must do your duty, mayor, and protect my new press. I want no trouble. I just want peace," said Elijah. The mayor felt like many of the people did. He did not like the anti-slavery paper either. He thought the minister was a troublemaker, but he said, "I'll send the sheriff to stand guard at the warehouse." When Elijah left, the mayor called the sheriff. The mayor grinned, and the sheriff understood. "You protect that silly press, sheriff," said the mayor. "But around 10 o'clock tonight, you can go home. Do you know what I mean?" "I know what you mean," said the sheriff. He knew what to do. He would let the mob do what they wanted after he left. Elijah feared the mob would come to the warehouse, so he did not go home that night. "I must stay and protect my press," he told his wife. "There is no money for a new one." "Oh, Elijah, I am worried sick," his wife said. "I must save the press," Elijah said. "Don't be afraid. The warehouse is made of stone. There's no more solid building in town." Elijah and a few friends went to the warehouse. At first everything was quiet. Then, about 10 o'clock, the sheriff went home. It seemed like a signal. Pretty soon 30 men came out of a saloon where they had been waiting. A few of them had guns. Most of them had rocks. One of the men knocked on the door. He knocked hard. "Open up," he shouted. Elijah looked out the small window. "What do you want?" he asked. "We want the press, Lovejoy. We want to throw it in the river where it belongs." "Please go and leave us in peace," Elijah said. "We cannot give up the press. It speaks God's truth. God's truth will not be silenced by a mob." The leader of the mob drew a pistol. "We want the press," he said. "We will stop at nothing to get it." Suddenly the mob began hurling stones at the warehouse. Quickly the windows were smashed. Glass flew into the little room. Then the mob fired their guns. They were furious, but the stone warehouse stood. "Let's climb on the roof and start a fire," a man shouted. "We'll burn them out." The others chanted, "Burn them out! Burn them out!" Men ran to get ladders. A woman saw what was going on. She went to the mayor. "You must come and stop the riot. Somebody will get killed," she said. The mayor came down to the warehouse. He saw the men climbing on the roof with torches. He shouted, "Reverend Lovejoy, just give them what they want. Nobody will be hurt. Give them your press. You can't hope to save it now." But Elijah refused. The mayor did nothing to stop the mob. He stood and watched. Soon a fire was burning on the roof. Smoke began to fill the room. The men were choking. "We must get out of here," one of them said. Elijah looked sadly at his little press. He had tried to spread the word of God. It meant more to him than anything. He remembered committing his life to Christ as a young man. Even then he knew there was no turning back. Now he stepped to the door. He would go first. He didn't want his friends to be hurt. Some of the mob were hiding behind piles of lumber. "Look, there's Lovejoy," one said. "There's the troublemaker." The other man was surprised. "Look how he just stands there. He's not even afraid." "Well, he should be," sneered the first man. He had a gun. He hated everything Elijah stood for, and he aimed the gun and fired. Elijah was struck 5 times in the chest. He turned. He walked a few feet into the warehouse. "Oh, dear God," he said, "I am shot, I am shot." And then he fell and died. One of Elijah's friends cried out, "Elijah Lovejoy is dead." The mob heard this. They rushed into the warehouse. They did not even look at the dead man on the floor. They began smashing the press. They carried pieces away, and they threw the pieces in the river. Elijah Lovejoy was still a young man when he gave his life to defend God's truth. He knew it was God's will to stop the cruelty of slavery. And on that dark night in 1837, he died for what he believed in. When the mob smashed his press and killed him, they thought they'd won. But other good men and women were inspired by what Elijah Lovejoy did, and they carried on his work. They put an end to slavery, and God's truth went marching on. Elijah had not died in vain. He had really won.